something, you Rich? I think this just might be my masterpiece.
Quentin Tarantino's filmmaking is nothing if not confident. He's a director who's very sure of himself, believes wholeheartedly in his creative instincts, and self-mythologizes to a fault. So when he's putting together a new movie and determines it to be the finest work he's ever done, he doesn't hesitate to say so in the text of the film itself. At the end of Inglourious Basterds, when Aldo Raine is done carving a perfect swastika into Hans Lander's forehead, he tells Ryan Howard it just might be his masterpiece. This is, of course, Tarantino himself using Aldo as a mouthpiece to boldly declare Inglourious Basterds to be his magnum opus. Just like Aldo, Tarantino has finally perfected this craft he's been working at for a while, and he doesn't shy away from self-congratulation. And the more I think about it, the more I agree with Aldo. Inglourious Basterds is Tarantino's masterpiece. Pulp Fiction or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood would be my personal favorite Tarantino movie, but I think Inglourious Basterds might be his greatest film. Tarantino said so himself in a recent interview on the Church of Tarantino podcast. He said Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his favorite film he's made, and Kill Bill is the movie he was born to make, the one that could have only come from his imagination and his particular cocktail of cinematic influences. But Bastards is his best. It's his most meaningful film, it's his most fully realized ensemble, it's his tightest script, and yet every scene has plenty of room to breathe. And it's the perfect intersection between the maturity and dramatic substance of Jackie Brown and the bombastic, balls-to-the-wall ultra-violence of Kill Bill. Inglourious Basterds is big, badass, blood-soaked cinematic entertainment, but it also has a lot more going on under the surface, with deeper themes, social and historical commentary, and emotional resonance. Tarantino wrote the first draft of Inglourious Basterds in 1998. It was supposed to be his fourth film, his follow-up to Jackie Brown, but he couldn't come up with an ending, so he eventually moved on to Kill Bill, and then Death Proof. But he never stopped trying to crack it. By 2002, he had 3 different versions of the script, all without an ending.
People thought I was going through writer's block. I was going through the opposite. I couldn't stop writing.
As the story grew bigger and bigger and he kept coming up with new characters and material, he considered turning the project into a miniseries.
My idea at the time, because it was just so big and so unwieldy, was to do it as a miniseries. And that really was what I was planning on doing.
But decided against that because this story was worthy of the big screen. So he got his shit together, trimmed down the script to a more manageable length, came up with a doozy of an ending, and got to work crafting his magnum opus. After all that iteration, Tarantino ended up with the best possible version of this story. The characters were all fully fleshed out, he had a stranglehold on the tone and vision of the piece, and he figured out the best narrative vehicle for everyone in the ensemble. The original storyline for Shoshana, for example, saw her drawing up a death list of all the Nazis she wanted revenge against and picking them off one by one. But after he gave that storyline to the bride, Tarantino rewrote Shoshana's story to be more nuanced and less pulpy, and ultimately a better piece of storytelling.
Fabelhaft, mein Lieber, fabelhaft. Ist Ihr bester Film bisher. Danke, Führer.
As much fun as a movie like Reservoir Dogs or Kill Bill might be, they don't have much to say. They deal with interesting themes, but there's not much in the way of a message or social commentary. Inglourious Basterds, on the other hand, actually has some engaging messaging in the subtext. It's a Tarantino-ified take on one of the most well-worn plot formulas in the genre. A bunch of guys on a mission, a la The Dirty Dozen or Guns of Navarone, with the fresh twist of directly pitting Jewish soldiers against their German oppressors. But it's also a meta look at the role of cinema in World War II. The entire third act revolves around the premiere of a propaganda film within a film, where a sniper with a high body count is presented as a noble hero. During the screening, the audience cheers him on. It highlights how filmmakers like Leni Riefenstahl used the magic of cinema to dictate public opinion. If you showed a German audience horrifying images of SS officers marching people to their deaths in concentration camps, it wouldn't be so easy to convince them they were on the right side.
Are we the baddies?
But if you show a lone gunman heroically picking off the enemy all by himself, or you show breathtaking wide shots emphasizing the might of the armed forces, the same shots that influenced George Lucas's portrayal of the Empire, then you can galvanize the country to get behind a fascistic regime. Inglourious Basterds demonstrates the power of propaganda and uses some of those same techniques to flip the script and empower the Jewish American soldiers on screen by presenting them as triumphant heroes, an unstoppable force that has the enemy shaking in their jackboots. Come and See and Grave of the Fireflies might capture the horrors of war more effectively, and Apocalypse Now might be a more chilling and mesmerizing cinematic vision of warfare, but Inglourious Basterds is arguably the ultimate war film because it's a war film about the role of film in war.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
From the breakfast table like a virgin discussion in Reservoir Dogs to the diner stick-up freeze frame in Pulp Fiction, Tarantino knows how to give his films a memorable opening scene that hooks viewers straight away. But the opening of Inglourious Basterds is on a whole nother level. It's in the conversation with the all-time greatest opening scenes in film history. It has the tension and explosive climax of Once Upon a Time in the West's iconic opening, and it gives us an unforgettable introduction to an unforgettable villain like the Dark Knight's iconic opening. We begin in Nazi-occupied France, where a French dairy farmer is chopping wood outside his house on a seemingly normal, seemingly tranquil day. And then he sees a convoy of SS officers coming over the horizon. He immediately springs into action and mobilizes his family, like he's known this day was coming. Colonel Hans Lander arrives with the convoy and steps inside to talk to the farmer. Lander is there to determine whether or not the farmer is harboring Jewish refugees, and when the scene begins, we don't know whether he is. We saw that he was scared when he saw the Nazis coming, but anyone in Europe at this time would be terrified at the sight of Nazis. It could be a death sentence. But Tarantino doesn't keep us in the dark for too long. While Lander and the farmer are talking, he slowly pans down below the floorboards to show that there are indeed Jewish refugees hiding out on this farm. The genius of this scene hinges on that moment, taking us under the floorboards. Hitchcock used the same technique to build tension. He called it the bomb under the table technique. Hitchcock's theory was that if a bomb goes off suddenly in the middle of a scene, then the audience will only get a fleeting moment of surprise.
What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock.
But if you show them the bomb under the table well before it goes off, then they'll spend the entire scene on the edge of their seats waiting for the explosion.
Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information.
A perfect example of this is the opening scene of Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, in which a time bomb is planted in a car and then we follow the car for what feels like an eternity. That's why Hitchcock was the master of suspense. His techniques were simple but effective, and Tarantino puts an interesting new spin on the bomb under the table, the Jews under the floorboards. From that moment on, you're hanging in suspense, praying Lander won't discover the people hiding under the floorboards, dreading the moment he will. Christoph Waltz could have earned his Oscar from this scene alone. He comes into the scene with a big affable smile and has plenty of small talk and compliments for the family, but as soon as he dispenses with the pleasantries and reveals he already knows the farmer is hiding refugees, that smile ever so slowly, ever so subtly turns into a much more sinister look.
You're sheltering enemies of the state, are you not?
Yes.
Giancarlo Esposito has the same ability. He can switch from friendly to menacing with an almost invisible facial shift. That incredible opening set a high bar that the rest of the film had to live up to, and miraculously it does. None of the subsequent sequences top that opening. Tarantino himself has called it the best thing he's written since the Sicilian scene from True Romance. But it's not a steep drop-off like Ghost Ship or Spectre. The film that follows is worthy of that opening.
Au revoir, Shoshana!
Gorlami? Per cortesia, me lo ripeti ancora?
Gorlami.
Mi scusi, con me?
Gorlami.
Ancora una volta.
Gorlami.
Tarantino's greatest asset as a writer is his sumptuous dialogue. He can make a conversation about the European variations of classic McDonald's meals riveting.
Royale with cheese. Royale with cheese. That's right.
He can write a dinner scene at a slave plantation that's as tense and terrifying as anything you've seen in a horror film.
To the man with the exceptional beard.
He can write a chat about the Delphonics over a cup of coffee that's both an insightful discussion of the music and a subtextual way to show two characters falling in love.
It's pretty.
Tarantino's dialogue is distinctive and stylish and idiosyncratic. Only he can write dialogue the way he writes it, and you know it as soon as you hear it. But at the same time, it captures the mundane music of everyday conversation. It walks a fine line between sounding like how people actually talk and sounding how people wish they sounded when they talk. Give that dialogue to a Samuel L. Jackson or an Uma Thurman or a Christoph Waltz to work their magic on it, and there's nothing like it.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
The dialogue in Inglourious Basterds is even more impressive than Tarantino's usual stuff because the movie switches between three primary languages. He doesn't just write conversations in his native tongue, there are lengthy scenes in German and French too, and a smidge of Italian. Tarantino didn't write all the foreign language dialogue himself, of course. He had help. Tom Tykwer is credited for German dialogue translation, and Nicholas Richard is credited for French dialogue translation. But they were working from his words, and his words captured the different dialects and vocal tics of the nationalities he was writing for. Even the English dialogue is split between American English and British English, which are two very different vernaculars, and he nails both. And the movie has even more lingual trickery beyond switching between three different languages. The French scenes don't just have native French speakers speaking to each other, the German scenes don't just have native German speakers speaking to each other. A lot of the characters have assumed identities and undercover personas they have to keep up. The best example of this is the basement scene, in which English Archie Hickox has to convince a bunch of native Germans that he's one of them. His language has to be flawless or they'll see right through him. This is so much more gripping than the equivalent scene in Where Eagles Dare, in which we see Clint Eastwood go undercover as a German officer. The way the movie presents it, Clint just speaks in English, and we're left to just assume he's speaking such perfect, fluent German that none of the native Germans can tell he's not German. It's much more engaging if the actors are actually speaking German and trying not to slip up. That's a 20-minute sequence where all they do is drink and play Who Am I, but you're on the edge of your seat the whole time, waiting for the Nazis to figure out there are imposters in their midst. It's another variation on the bomb under the table, the Englishman disguised among Germans. And in the end, the language is flawless. It's a hand gesture that gives them away. That's the level of attention to detail on display here. The tiniest cultural hiccup can lead to a bloodbath.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi boss.
Frederick Zola's unrequited infatuation with Shoshana is Tarantino's most nuanced and realistic love story since Jackie Brown and Max Cherry. Vincent Vega and Mia Wallace fancy each other just because. They're stock characters, and the fact that there's a mutual attraction at all is enough of a conflict given who Mia's husband is. Django and Broomhilda have a fairy tale marriage.
Hey, little troublemaker. You silver-tongued devil, you.
Jamie Foxx and Kerry Washington have great chemistry, but their love serves more as a plot device and Django's motivation than a genuine romantic arc. Jackie and Max's story was different. It was a touching, relatable, real look at two older people finding love later in life. A love that ultimately wasn't meant to be. The Frederick Shoshana storyline pulls off the same ingenious trick, delivering a real, identifiable romantic story in the midst of this genre epic. It plays on a situation that's all too familiar to women. This guy is infatuated with her, she makes it clear she's not interested, but he won't leave her alone. That's unfortunately something that every woman in the world has had to deal with. But here there's the added conflict that he's a Nazi occupier and she's a Jew in hiding. This whole arc could have come off as very one-note and archetypal and simplistic, but the way Tarantino tells the story, you understand both perspectives. He's been hailed as a national hero, so he's getting used to being worshipped everywhere he goes, and he naturally finds the one person who doesn't kiss his ass very alluring. Meanwhile, she's a Jewish refugee whose family were murdered by Nazis, so she won't give a Nazi the time of day, especially one who's being celebrated celebrated for his unusually high body count, but at the same time she might give herself away if she lets her repulsion show too openly. So she grits her teeth and coasts by on low-key hostility and disinterest whenever she's in a room with him. This quasi-love story ends in tragedy when Frederick comes to Shoshana's projection room during the premiere to bug her. She's in the midst of her plot to kill Hitler and everyone else in there. She couldn't be more over him, but he's finally had enough of her not worshipping the ground he walks on like everyone else does, so he kicks off.
Maintenant, allez-vous-en. Frédéric, vous m'avez fait mal.
Ma foi, ça fait plaisir de voir que vous pouvez ressentir quelque chose.
Quick-thinking Shoshana invites Frederick into the room under the guise of seduction and shoots him. It's an ingenious move. She uses his romantic interest against him. It's really easy to play a guy who's infatuated with you. He'll throw all caution to the wind if he thinks you might have sex with him. But the gunshot isn't fatal, so Frederick fires one back as he's bleeding out. The romantic arc in Inglourious Basterds is basically the anti-Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet killed themselves because they couldn't stand to live without each other. Frederick and Shoshana killed each other because they couldn't stand the sight of each other.
Nein, 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 nein!
Inglourious Basterds has all the familiar stylistic trademarks of Tarantino's work. Graphic violence, dark comedy, armed standoffs, verbose monologues, pop culture references, a novelistic chapter structure, music taken from other films, and good old-fashioned revenge. But it also introduced a new Tarantino trademark, one that has defined all his films since: historical revisionism. When Tarantino was writing the final incarnation of Inglourious Basterds and he was down to the third act, he got stuck once again. He had Shoshana, Landa, and the Bastards all at the Nation's Pride premiere in the midst of two separate plots to kill Hitler, and he didn't know where to go from there. During a late-night writing session, he came up with a novel way to move the story forward. Just fucking kill him.
I'm writing the sequence, and now everything's going right. The Bastards have taken over the theater, and it seems like it's going to go good. Now I got to figure out, what am I going to do about Hitler?
It occurred to him that his movie wasn't beholden to the facts of history. He could do whatever he wanted. So what was stopping one or both of these assassination plots from succeeding?
So I go, what am I going to do? And it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm writing by myself, and then I finally decide, just kill him. All right? And so I took a piece of paper, and I just wrote on it, just effing kill him. All right? And I put it by my bedside table, and I went to bed.
He slept on it, and when he woke up, he was still excited by the idea, and the iconic climax of Inglourious Basterds was born.
When I woke up the next morning, I figured I would look at the piece of paper and realize, was it a good idea or a bad idea? After I had a night's sleep, and I read it, I go, it's a great idea.
No other World War II movie has had the balls to shoot Hitler in the face. There's nothing inglorious about the sight of a pair of Jewish soldiers riddling Hitler with bullets while another Jewish refugee burns all his cronies alive around him. That's about as glorious as a trip to the movies can get. When the film came out, audiences were appropriately thrilled by Tarantino's new version of history. Since then, Tarantino has been using the magic of cinema to right the wrongs of history. He's been going back to the ugliest chapters of human history, whether it's American slavery or the Manson murders, to give the perpetrators their comeuppance, and it's still a joy to see. Before Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino tended to just have fun with his on-screen portrayal of violence. There were some exceptions. The Stuck in the Middle with You torture scene has a disturbing juxtaposition, the bride being buried alive is a truly terrifying sequence, and the minimalist way he shot Chris Tucker and Robert De Niro's murders in Jackie Brown highlighted the shocking cold-bloodedness of Samuel L. Jackson's character. But for the most part, Tarantino would lop off body parts, fill the screen with squibs, and have a great time doing it.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
That all changed with Inglourious Basterds. The violence in Inglourious Basterds is split between two distinctive tones and styles. The righteous, vengeful violence against the people who deserve it is fun and cinematic. Stylistically, Inglourious Basterds is essentially a spaghetti western set during World War II, with Morricone on the soundtrack and Nazi scalping antics harking back to Navajo Joe. When we see the bear Jew bludgeon one of the guys trying to wipe out his people, it's a similar rush to watching Django gun down Major Jackson's men, or watching the man with no name blast angel eyes into an empty grave plot. But the oppressive historical violence against Jews, like Shoshana's family getting massacred under the floorboards, is appropriately grim and horrifying. Tarantino later reused this technique in Django Unchained. When Broomhilda is getting whipped or D'Artagnan is getting mauled by dogs, it's appropriately horrific. But when Django is blowing off a slave tracker's dick or whipping the brittle brother who whipped Broomhilda, it's a glorious cinematic spectacle. Tarantino is often accused of creating exploitative violent entertainment, but this is a master of dramatized violence at work.
You! Damn it, Hirschberg. Donnie, bring the other one over here. Alive!
You know something, you bitch? I think this just might be my masterpiece.
Every great artist signs their work, and Tarantino's signature on Inglourious Basterds is that final line, "This just might be my masterpiece." It's a bold claim, especially for a filmmaker whose track record is as strong as Tarantino's, but it's hard to disagree with. Pulp Fiction will always have a special place in my heart because my first childhood viewing blew my perception of what a film could be wide open, but it ultimately doesn't have much to say beyond presenting serious subject matter in a darkly comedic light.
Oh, what the fuck's happening? Oh, man, man!
Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face.
Why the fuck you do that?
Well, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident.
I could watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a million times and it would never get old. I love hanging out in that nostalgic vision of 60s Los Angeles, but it's primarily a meta reflection on Tarantino's filmmaking style. Jackie Brown is a subversively understated Tarantino movie, a genuinely touching, mature love story disguised as a crime thriller, but it's missing all the stylistic hallmarks that make Quentin's movies uniquely his own. Reservoir Dogs is one of the greatest debut features of all time. Tarantino's vision of genre cinema arrived fully formed, but it's clearly the work of a first-time director. Django Unchained is a spaghetti western shot through a prestige Hollywood lens, and a brutal depiction of American slavery like no other, but its third act drags a bit after the Candyland climax. Inglourious Basterds has it all. It's a bloody, action-packed, darkly hilarious Tarantino genre epic with a sprawling web of characters and subplots that all come together under one roof for one of the ballsiest, craziest, most unexpected climactic sequences in movie history. But it also has a lot to say about the power of propaganda and the fight against fascism. And in that sense, it's even more relevant today than when it came out.
Should that for killing Jews? Bravery.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.